Hi, I'm Mitch Gallagher. Welcome to Sweetwater's iOS Update. This time out, a handy audio calculator for your musician's toolbox. Let's get started. Audiofile Calc is a free app for iOS devices that lets you do all sorts of handy calculations when you're in the studio, especially if you're working in a DAW. Things like setting delay times, you can figure out note lengths, how long a measure lasts, lots of useful things you can do. When you open Audiofile Calc, you're presented with a menu of different options for things you can calculate. So you can look at note length, for example. So here we're looking at a dotted eighth note at 56 beats per minute, and it's going to last for 803 milliseconds. If we change that to a quarter note at, say, 120 beats per minute, it's going to last 500 milliseconds. You can even tap in a tempo. Now this is very handy when you're trying to set a delay time that matches along with a song that's playing back via audio. We can also calculate how long a bar will last. So if we're in 4/4 time, we have 120 beats per minute, the bar will last for 2 seconds. If we change this to, say, 6/4 time, still at 120 beats per minute, we're at 3 seconds for the bar. For the tempo, again, we can tap that in if we like, or you can directly enter a tempo. We can calculate song length based on tempo, the number of bars, and the number of beats per bar. We can also look at beats to tempo conversion. We can look at time to samples conversion. We can also convert samples to time. We can compare two tempos. So if you're changing from one tempo to another tempo, you can look at the percent of change that you're after. You can also look at that in sense of tuning. And we can change our tempo by percentages and see what the BPM will be. So if we're at 120 beats per minute and we want to change to 85%, it'll now be at 222 beats per minute. We can also add times together, so we can sum times to get a total. We can subtract times. We can also look at pitch-related calculations. For example, we can convert a note name into a MIDI note number. So if we're on note D4, the MIDI note number will be 62. We can also change this, so we could look at a B-flat 6, and that's going to be MIDI note number 94. We can change MIDI notes into note names, so the reverse process there. We can convert frequency into a MIDI note number, and we can convert wavelength to a MIDI note number. If you're working with timecode, we can convert frames to timecode. We can convert timecode from 24 frames per second in this case to 30 frames per second. We can also change timecode from 30 frames per second to 24 frames per second in this case, and we also can calculate the offset. We can compare the decibel change when we look at different powers. So if we're at 100 watts of reference and we're measuring 85 watts, we know we've gone up by over 20 dB. Same thing with voltages. And in acoustics, we can convert distance to time. So if we know that we're 40 feet, 50 feet from the stage, let's change this to 40 feet from the stage. The time delay will actually be 35 milliseconds. We can go the reverse, changing from time to distance. Calculate sound pressure levels based on distance. We can look at panning. And we can also look at file size calculations. So at a sample rate of 44.1 kilohertz with 16-bit bit depth and a length of 1 second, we'll be at 5,168 kilobytes of data. So you can see there's quite an array of different calculations you can do with Audiofile Calc. A lot of useful things here. I hope you enjoyed this look at Audiofile Calc. It's a handy app to keep on your iOS devices when you're in the studio. And thanks for joining me for Sweetwater's iOS Update. Be sure to tune in next time. We'll have more apps, more hardware accessories, and more tips on making music with your iOS devices. I'm Mitch Gallagher.